Aunt Evelyn died today. Is there a family member you can't stand? The one who everyone avoids at gatherings. The metaphorical black sheep everyone hates. My family had Aunt Evelyn. To paint a better picture of her, imagine the queen bee of Karens, the source of arrogance that all other Karens fed from. She was the full package. That stupid short haircut and deep frown, always ready to complain. One time, when a server forgot her water, she yelled at him in front of the whole restaurant until he burst into tears. When she graced us with her presence, nothing was ever good enough for her. The second she walked through the door, her sneer appeared. She buzzed about the place, complaining about whatever she set her shrew eyes on. Our chairs were too hard, we were too loud, the food was terrible. Once, with just a snide comment, she reduced my mother to tears. I'll never forget the way her face crumpled or when she hid in her bedroom, refusing to come out until she left. Aunt Evelyn didn't even care. She just went back to frowning at her plate. "That diet isn't working out for you, is it?" she had said, not even looking at my mother as she spoke. My father puffed up in his chair, but ultimately said nothing. Coward. Despite all this, her monthly visits were tolerated barely. I didn't understand why until I grew older. Apparently, Aunt Evelyn was loaded and was the type that refused to spend it. When the inevitable finally happened, my parents wasted no time spending their inheritance. It might have been in bad taste, but none of us could even pretend to look sad. We just weren't good at acting. Her death was a release, even if it had been traumatizing. I was never going to talk about it. I wanted to shove it to the back of mind and repress it. The nightmares were proof it wasn't working. My therapist suggested writing it down, and at this point I'm willing to try anything. I just want to move past the whole thing and forget. So first off, Aunt Evelyn hated me. She made that very clear. Always saying I wasn't as cute as my little sister, commenting on my weight, pinching my cheeks a little too hard. I was fine with all that. As I said before, it was tolerated. If I didn't engage, she would scuttle off to her new target. But the final straw came when I saw her kick my dog. He wasn't even doing anything, just sitting in the grass. She had plenty of room to walk around him. He was minding his own business, but she kicked him for badness. I never knew anyone could be so cruel. His yelp was like a bullet to my heart. That was the day I discovered what true rage felt like. It was a white, hot feeling that spread from my head to my toes. 10 years old, and my body radiated with it. I remember walking up to her, hands shaking. She didn't see me. She was still yelling at my terrified dog. I don't know what I was thinking. I took one look at my little dog's eyes, heart lurching at his cowering form, and pushed. I only meant to get her away from my dog. I didn't know there was a hill there. Time seemed to slow as she fell, head over heels as she careened down, hollering all the while. She landed like a rag doll, leg at an awkward angle. The rage slowly left my body, only to be replaced with fear. The scene erupted into chaos. Aunt Evelyn screeched like a banshee. My parents shouted to be heard over her pained cries, fumbling to call an ambulance. I watched, numb, the scene blurring until they were nothing more than trembling insects. The only thing that kept me anchored to reality was my dog's wet nose, nudging my shaking hand. I threw my arms around him, hiding my face in his soft fur. After a quick ride to the hospital and berating every doctor in the place, Aunt Evelyn crawled back into my life, weighed down by a heavy cast, and that familiar sour look on her pinched face. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I didn't feel guilty. I was still angry, and maybe just a little bit satisfied. In my opinion, anyone who harms an innocent animal is no longer human, and I still think this today. But because my aunt was the type to sue over the smallest thing, She demanded that I pay her for emotional damages. Of course, at 10 years old, I didn't have a penny to my name. She knew this. She made enough comments about how poor we were. Instead, she demanded me to work for her. Basically, I had to be her unpaid servant. My parents were on my side. They understood it was, but were powerless to help me. I think they were scared of Aunt Evelyn, scared of losing her money anyway. And that was the punishment for avenging my dog. Every day after school, I had to walk, weighed down with heavy bags, to that old bat's house. Her house was small, only one story, built near a swamp. I knew I was close when the gnats started biting. She never acknowledged me when I opened the door. Just a quick, "Shut that door." She barked, "You're letting out the heat." She sat stuck in her armchair, shiny with age, her busted leg propped up on a cushion like a precious jewel, her exposed pink toes curled like claws. Aunt Evelyn sat rigid, downing glass after glass of red wine until her teeth turned red. "Hurry up and get cleaning," she snapped, sucking her teeth. With a sigh, I sank to my knees on her hard linoleum floor and grabbed my sponge. I scrubbed that place from top to bottom every single day until my fingers were red raw and stank of bleach. Yet even the strongest chemical couldn't break through her stink. The odor inside her house was a mixture of sour wine and boiled cabbage. In case you're wondering, I was the one that boiled the cabbage. It was all she ate. The sight of her slurping up the green sludge put me off the vegetable for years. This went on for a month, my patience wearing thin with every sharp word that passed through her lips. "Change the channel. Get my pills. Pull the curtains." No, not like that. In a fit of rage, I pulled hard enough to break the curtain pole. The harsh clatter was music to my ears compared to her shrill outbursts. I got slapped for that. Worth it. Then came the heat wave. Summer came with a vengeance that year, bringing with it a plague of big black flies. They hung in the air like pulsing clouds. You could hear them before you saw them. The flies invaded every house, crawling through open windows and hanging around sweaty bodies. Aunt Evelyn never seemed bothered by the flies or the heat. She cocooned herself in thick jumpers and throws, looking more like a furry slug than a person. Worse than that, she kept the radiators on full blast. When I opened the door, the wave of heat hit me like a wall. I was damp with sweat the minute I stepped inside. It was a miracle I never passed out. And did she ever offer me a drink? No, not once. One day I saw her gulp down her usual glass of wine, dead flies bobbing like ice. Suddenly I was glad she never offered me a drink. On my last day of servitude, the sun beamed down, as if celebrating my almost freedom. The flies were particularly aggressive that day, hanging around Evelyn's house. I had to fight my way to the door, swatting away flies the size of bullets. Stepping inside, I was hit with an acrid smell, worse than the cabbage and wine. I thought it was just the hot sun cooking the trash, or that old lady stink. Wrinkling my nose, I entered the kitchen to get the last day over with. Aunt Evelyn was nowhere to be seen. She wasn't in her usual spot. The indent in her armchair was cold. I didn't notice at first, distracted by having control of the big TV. But during the commercial break, I heard a noise from behind a closed door. The old bag must have decided to have me wait on her in bed. I rolled my eyes, counting down the seconds until I was home. As I got closer, the sound became clearer. Humming. An incessant humming. I had no idea what it was. Maybe it was a phone going off. I knocked on her door. "Aunt Evelyn, were you calling me?" No answer, just more of that sound. Whatever it was big. I could feel it reverberate through the wooden door. A shiver suddenly went up my spine, but I didn't know why. "Are you all right?" Silence, except for that heavy hum. I really didn't want to go into her bedroom. Who knows what that would have smelled like? As I hesitated, the humming increased tenfold, growing into a vibration, like that of an old car engine. I felt it under my feet. It traveled up my bones. I suddenly had the mental image of some strange creature growling with hunger, and I was walking right into its lair. I gripped the metal handle, hand slick with sweat. It turned slowly and opened with a loud, drawn-out creak. It was dark inside, despite the harsh sunlight outside. The curtains were drawn tight, and it was warm, unbearably so. It felt like walking into an oven. Sweat immediately dripped down my face, stinging my eyes. As my eyes slowly adjusted to the gloom, I could just about make out a bed. There was a shape on top, moving, writhing. The familiar shape of Aunt Evelyn sitting up in her bed, in the dark. Still as a statue, yet her shape shifted. It was hard to describe. That shivery feeling was still there, getting worse, until my legs shook with every step. My senses were warning me about something I wasn't aware of yet, some unseen danger. I hadn't even realized that the humming was now an angry buzzing. The sound grew to a crescendo. I couldn't even hear myself think. The smell was stronger too. It was like old wine, but if it had sat in the hot sun for a day, rotten with a hint of sweet. It was hard to describe. I fully expected to see her passed out, drunk, surrounded by a mess that I would have to clean up. Heaving a sigh, I blindly reached for the curtains and flung them open. Sunlight filled the room, and as my eyes fell upon the scene, a scream burst from my mouth. Flies. Huge, fat, black flies painted the scene. Millions crawled over the bed, writhing over a festering mass. A mass that used to be Aunt Evelyn. They covered her like a second skin, going in and out of her slack mouth. A thin trail of vomit dribbled down her chin. Honey to the flies. Her eyes, once filled with hate, were now blank and lifeless. I could only watch in horror as a little white maggot popped out, shiny goo leaking down her pale cheek. It ate its way out. As I stood, stunned, the swarm rose above the bed like a gross, writhing tornado at. They started their buzzing again, heavier, angry at me for disturbing their meal. That was the last thing I saw before I bolted from the room, the buzzing hot on my trail. I waved my arms like a madman as I ran, terrified of those flies latching onto my flesh. They had a taste for it now. I could feel it as they whizzed past my ears, the sound magnified by my panic. I just screamed, and flapped my arms. I don't remember what happened after that. I came to when a medic was shining a light into my eyes. A neighbor, having heard my terrified screams, called emergency services. She told me later that she found me on the lawn, sobbing and swatting at things that weren't there. I couldn't even speak, just babbled. It seemed like hours before my parents came, both in tears as they swept me up into a tight hug. I hugged tighter, holding on to them for near 2 days, panicking if we were separated. Later, they told me my face terrified them. They said I just stared into nothing. I didn't even blink. An officer had to explain the situation. I didn't tell them anything. How could I even find the words? The medics, donned in alien-like hazmat suits, carried Aunt Evelyn out, her body bag shielding her from the sun and curious eyes. My parents never saw the full extent. I envied them for that. A few flies followed her out, fat and heavy, bobbing around the gurney, desperate for one last taste. Aunt Evelyn had died in her sleep, choked on her vomit after downing a full bottle of wine. She must have forgotten to close her window. The flies, attracted by her smell, invited themselves in for a feast. It was a horrible way to go. No one deserved that. Not even her. I refused to go back into that house. I couldn't. What if the flies were still there? Waiting for me, waiting for fresh meat. At night, I can still hear it. That horrible buzzing right by my ears as I sleep. I always wake up slapping at things that aren't there. Even now, when I'm fully grown, I have to keep every window closed, even in a dead heat. No matter how much I sweat, I will never open a window again. Even as I lay awake at night, baking in the heat, I strain my ears, waiting for that telltale buzz. I don't think I'll ever stop hearing it.